Apparently, asking one adult to take a personal phone call off speaker in a waiting room is now policing other people's lives, which is interesting because I thought a waiting room was where everyone waited, not where one woman hosted a live podcast about her cousin's divorce. I was at the dental office on a Thursday morning for a routine cleaning. Routine, that word matters. I was not there to cause trouble. I was not there to monitor strangers. I was there because my calendar said teeth, and when your calendar says teeth, you go. The waiting room was small but pleasant. Beige chairs, soft music, a little table with old magazines, a water dispenser that made one dramatic bubble every few minutes. Normal waiting room energy. There were maybe 8 of us. A man reading on his phone, an older gentleman working on a crossword, a mother and teenager sitting quietly, someone near the window filling out paperwork, and me holding my purse, my insurance card, and the quiet dignity of a woman who arrived 12 minutes early. Then the phone rang. Not a gentle ringtone, not one of those soft marimba things. This ringtone sounded like a slot machine having a medical emergency. Everyone heard it. The person near the window looked at her phone, made no real effort to silence it, and answered on speaker. On speaker, in a dental waiting room. Now, I understand emergencies happen. I am not a monster. If someone gets a serious call, of course they answer. Step outside. Lower your voice, say, "I'll call you back." Society has options. She chose none of them. She said, "Hey, I'm at the dentist," loudly enough that the magazines could have updated themselves. The person on the other end said something we could all hear, because again, speaker. Then she laughed and said, "No, I'm just waiting. They're always behind." First of all, they were not behind yet. My appointment was at 9:30. It was 9:23. Let us be accurate. Second, why were all of us suddenly included in this customer service review? If you appreciate basic waiting room silence, subscribe. Because apparently not wanting to hear both sides of a stranger's phone call now makes you the villain with plaque concerns. At first, I said nothing. That matters. People act like I pounced. I did not. I shifted in my chair. I looked at the receptionist's desk. I looked at the little sign that said, "Please, silence cell phones." Very tasteful sign, clear font, reasonable request. The call continued. She said, "No," Jason said, "he's done this time." Then the speaker voice said, "He always says that." Then she said, "I know," but she found the messages. So now we were in it. The older gentleman paused over his crossword. The teenager looked up from her phone. The man reading stared at the wall with the focus of someone trying very hard not to learn family secrets. I did not want to know Jason. I did not want to know what he did. I did not want to know who found the messages. I especially did not want to know any of this in a room with complimentary floss samples. The receptionist looked up once, just once, a professional glance. The kind that says, "I hear this, but I am paid to survive it quietly." The call kept going. She said, "Well, she should have checked his tablet months ago." The speaker voice said, "Exactly."
Exactly. No. Nothing about this was exact. We had not consented to episode 4 of whatever was happening.
I waited another minute because I am fair. I believe in giving people a chance to self-correct. The problem is that some people hear silence and interpret it as permission. The water dispenser bubbled. The soft music tried its best. The phone call got louder. Then she said, "Hold on, I'm putting my bag down," and placed the phone flat on the side table. Flat, speaker up, like she was presenting evidence to the room. That was the moment the call stopped being private behavior and became shared programming. So I leaned slightly forward and said, in a calm voice, "Excuse me, would you mind taking it off speaker?" That was the sentence. Not hang up. Not how dare you. Not Jason sounds awful. Even though from the limited information forced upon us, Jason did not sound ideal. I simply asked her to take it off speaker. She turned and looked at me like I had interrupted sworn testimony. She said, "I'm on the phone." I said, "Yes, that's actually the part everyone can hear." The teenager smiled into her sleeve. I saw it. I am not inventing support. There was quiet community confirmation. She said, "It's a public place." There it was, the phrase people use when they want shared space to become personal territory. I said, "Exactly. It's public." That means other people are in it. Tell me in the comments, because I genuinely want to understand, when did public start meaning I can do whatever I want at full volume? She picked up the phone but did not turn off speaker. She just held it closer to her mouth and said, "Some lady is complaining." Some lady. Not someone asked me to lower my call. Not, I might be a little loud. Some lady, very courtroom, very ready for a community post. The voice on the speaker said, "People are so rude." Now the entire waiting room heard someone who was not even physically present call me rude. I said, "The irony is audible. Was that necessary?" Maybe not. Was it accurate? Completely. The receptionist made a small coughing sound, which I chose to interpret as professional agreement. The woman said, "You don't have to listen." I looked around the room. Beige walls, 7 feet of carpet. No escape route that did not involve abandoning my appointment and my cleaning. I said, "That is not how sound works." The man with the phone suddenly looked down very quickly, which usually means someone is trying not to laugh. She huffed and said, "I'm almost done." That is a dangerous sentence. Almost done can mean 10 seconds, or it can mean the speakerphone equivalent of a documentary series. She continued on. Speaker. Now she was quieter, but still audible. The kind of quieter where the person believes effort has been made, but everyone can still hear the emotional architecture of the conversation. She said anyway. The lawyer told her not to respond. The older gentleman wrote something in his crossword puzzle with unusual focus. I sincerely hope the clue was legal disaster, 5 letters, because we were all solving it together. At that point, a hygienist opened the door and called, "Karen, not me. Another Karen, I want that clear." The woman with the phone laughed and said, "Of course her name is Karen." Now, I was not being called, but there are moments when a room shifts and you understand destiny has placed a spotlight on your forehead. The actual Karen stood up from the corner very quietly, which made the whole thing worse. I said, "For the record, I'm not Karen." The speaker voice said, "Sounds like one." That is when the room changed, because it is one thing to be rude to people physically present. It is another to outsource rudeness through a phone speaker. If you think taking a loud personal call off speaker in a waiting room is basic manners, hit the like button, because apparently that is now a controversial platform. I said, "Maybe the person on the phone should not be participating in the waiting room." The woman stared at me. "You're really bothered by a phone call?" I said, "By the broadcast version, yes." She said, "You need to relax." And there it was, the emergency exit phrase for people who have no defense. Relax, as if the calm person making a simple request is the emotional one, not the person live streaming Jason's collapse next to a ficus. The receptionist finally stood up slightly and said, "Ma'am, we do ask that calls be taken off speaker or outside." Beautiful sentence. Professional, simple, institutional. The woman looked betrayed, like the dental office had chosen a side in a custody battle. She said, "I'm a patient here." The receptionist said, "Of course. We just try to keep the waiting room quiet."
Quiet.
There it was, the word we were all pretending not to need. The woman pressed something on her phone. The speaker went silent. Finally, she put the phone to her ear and said, "I'll call you back. Apparently I'm disturbing the peace." Apparently. I did not say anything. I simply sat back. My blood pressure, which I do not monitor publicly, returned to a civilized level. For about 40 seconds, the room was peaceful. Then she said to no one in particular, "People can't handle real life anymore." I said nothing. "That is growth." Then she said, "Everyone's so sensitive." I still said nothing. "That is advanced growth." Then she said it was just a phone call, and I said, "For you." The teenager coughed into her sleeve again. The older gentleman wrote another crossword answer with real force. The receptionist looked at her screen like the scheduling software had suddenly become fascinating. Then my name was called. As I stood up, the woman said, "Enjoy your cleaning." I said, "Thank you. Enjoy the divorce proceedings." Now, before everyone gasps, I did not mean her divorce. It was Jason's situation, or maybe his cousin's. Honestly, the family tree had not been presented in a responsible format. The hygienist looked at me. I smiled. We walked back. The cleaning was fine. No cavities, which felt spiritually appropriate. When I came out, the woman was gone. The waiting room was quiet. The water dispenser bubbled once, and I accepted that as closure. I thought that was the end. It was not the end. That evening, my sister sent me a screenshot from a local group. The post said, "To the woman at the dentist who publicly humiliated me for taking an important phone call, I hope you learn compassion, important phone call." It was on speaker. Those two facts are not natural partners. The comments were predictable. People are so judgmental. Maybe she was going through something. Mind your business. And one person wrote, "Waiting rooms are stressful enough without strangers policing you." Policing. I asked for the call to become a call. My sister said, "Please tell me this wasn't you." I said, "Define humiliated." She said, "Did you comment on someone's divorce?" I said, "Only after being called a Karen by a remote participant." My husband heard this and said, "Remote participant?" I said, "Yes, the person on speaker had entered the waiting room acoustically." He closed his eyes. He does that when he understands the phrase but fears the context. The next month, I went back for a follow-up appointment. Not to make a point, teeth are an ongoing responsibility. And there, on the side table next to the magazines, was a new little sign. "Please take phone calls outside or off speaker." Now, did they put that sign there because of me? I cannot prove that. I am not claiming direct administrative influence. I am simply saying the sign appeared after I raised a concern about acoustic boundaries. That is called impact. I took a picture for my records, not to post. Documentation is not obsession. Documentation is how responsible adults preserve timelines before someone rewrites a speakerphone incident into a human rights violation. The receptionist saw me notice the sign. She gave the smallest smile. People can interpret that however they want. I interpreted it as quiet waiting room agreement. So no, I do not regret saying something. I regret that silence now has to be defended like a luxury product. I regret that public place has become a shield for private noise. I regret that Jason's tablet history became part of my dental care experience. Next time, I will explain what happened when a man at the pharmacy counter tried to save his place in line with a basket while he wandered away to compare vitamins. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because if I have to keep explaining the difference between shared space and personal volume, we might as well all grow from it together. I was not rude. I was not policing anyone's life. I was protecting a waiting room from becoming one person's speakerphone documentary. My side of the story, obviously.